Ali is a biotech entrepreneur with a background in systems engineering. He was galvanized into an active climate advocacy in 2019 by the realization that climate catastrophes were occurring much sooner than predicted by the accepted models. Ali is on the board of Science for Peace. So Ali, please go ahead.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me today. My message, unfortunately, is not very optimistic or positive, but it needs to be said. I have a very brief amount of time. I'm going to go over very quickly a history of Canada's broken promises and look a little bit forward towards what the future has in store for us, ruminating a little bit on what the word realism means going forward. First, I'm going to review our failure to our Indigenous peoples, the First Nations on Turtle Island, failure to Canadians and ourselves, and failure to the world at large. Unfortunately, the history of Canada can trace back to not honoring our treaties with our First Nations people, beginning with the dish with one spoon wampum, through fast forward to 1999, the Supreme Court of Canada ruling against British Columbia and Delgamuukw, to not abiding by the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And First Nations, our First Nations brothers and sisters have been at the forefront of the climate struggle for decades. We see this most recently in Fairy Creek, last year in Wet'suwet'en and Unistoten. They are amongst the leaders of trying to reframe thinking about the world as simply resources to be extracted, and as instead conceptualizing us as part of a living world that we can move forward. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into this deeper, but I encourage you to support our Indigenous friends, because their struggle is our struggle. Looking at Canada's international climate commitments, we also see a pattern of broken promises. This chart here shows a history of different climate summits and accords over time. On the x-axis here, you see time. On the y, it shows the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted annually by Canada. Each of these different color lines represents a different accord, starting from Earth Summit out through Paris. The dashed lines represent what we promised, and the solid lines is actually what transpired. We see a massive divergence between what we say and what we do again and again and again. There's a tracker. I would encourage everyone to check out this climateactiontracker.org. They have a report card for every country, and taking into account Canada's newest commitments, we get a score of highly insufficient today. Again, unfortunately, I don't have time to go into this into great detail, but what we have promised today is still highly insufficient for the world that we need. And it takes us to looking forward. You're going to hear a lot of people say, well, we need to be pragmatic. We need to be realistic. We can't do this. We can't have more ambitious targets. And we need to be thinking about what this world realistic does. It's doing a lot of work. We need to unpack it. Do they mean, are we being scientifically realistic? Are they meaning we're technologically realistic or politically realistic? Or realistic only in the sense that we're protecting the wealth of those who are entrenched and invested in those polluting industries? We need to remember that there is no negotiating with the climate. There's no negotiating with physics. Should realistic mean that we are doing something that takes us the path of least resistance? Or does it mean that we're actively condemning millions to death through our inaction? Many scientists are saying that we need a 50 to 60% reduction by 2030, yet we're only aiming for a 40 to 45% reduction. Sir Robert Watson, the former chair of the IPCC, said recently that countries need to double and triple their 2030 reduction commitments to be aligned with the Paris target. This was said when Canada's commitment was 30%. We have increased it to 40 to 45, yet that is still not enough. Officially, and I mean, our previous speaker has spoken a little bit about this, so I will not go into it in depth, but I will leave us with these words from the president of Palau. Our inaction is effectively, we may as well be bombing their islands. We cannot let that be the reality that transpires. Thank you.